I think we wanted to develop it. I think we wanted to get more energy into it, more a darker feel too, and expand, if you like, the horizons of the musical world that we were living in. So things were beginning to work live, in one or two clubs around there, and I think Friars was a key one, and Angel Godalming, and then Newcastle, Glasgow. It was quite strange because, we seemed to get through in sort of southern Europe, and then tougher working class cities, and it was a sort of strange balance, and it was harder for us, in the sort of more cliquey, cultured world of London and some of the big cities.
Anthony Phillips left, and so we had to make the decision. I originally thought, as I said before, I think I saw him as group leader in many ways, certainly the most influential person in the group. And I thought when he left, we probably would split up, actually. And then we had a conversation. Mike and Pete were very keen to carry on, and Richard McPhail, who was our roadie but a good friend and a sort of and big fan and everything, said there's no way you must carry on. You've really got something going here. So all these things came together, and we had a meeting, and we decided that we probably felt we could do better on the drums. That we liked John and everything. He was good, but he wasn't. Just felt we could have someone more creative in the drum seat. So we had to make this decision, and so then we were just auditioning, for a guitarist and a drummer.
I stuck loads of ads in Melody Maker, which was the paper that was the most powerful at the time. Loads of bands were formed off the back pages of that. I think the odd Rolling Stone might have got a gig from that, or the odd member of Led Zeppelin. I think possibly the whole band like that. And it was 5 years of ads, and eventually this crazy guy called Peter Gabriel phoned me up, and I figured he was at least as mad as I was.
Well, I saw the name constantly in the back pages of Melody Maker, which always had the gigs that were on around town, or around sort of, Greater London area, if you like. And they always seemed to be working. There was always them in Quintessence, I remember. And I remember complaining to my manager, or our manager, the band I was in, about, why are they working, we ain't, because we hardly worked at all. And really, I wasn't aware of their music at all, because we were actually playing all the time, but we weren't actually gigging. Until one day there was an advert, because I was kind of losing the plot with the band I was in. So I used to scour the back pages as well for jobs, and there was one box, advert with a box around, and Tony Stratton-Smith, who I knew very, very well. I had known him for years. And so I knew where to find him. I went to the Marquee Club bar and asked him if, cut a long story short, he said it was for Genesis. And I thought, at last I'll get to find out, what the music's like.
We did quite a few auditions, and I think so. I took a big role in that as a sort of drum fanatic, and obviously without Anthony, who was the other drum fanatic, we'd put ads in, went through all sorts, and I remember Phil impressed me because I think he'd said he played on a George Harrison session, and I thought, that was very impressive, but I think he'd actually done sort of third tambourine. But anyway, we had a lot of people, including some, I think, really quite useful drummers. And we did it at my parents' house, which is where Tony and I used to do a lot of writing, and we did some rehearsing. Mainly the rehearsals at that time, I think, were between my parents' house and Anthony's family's house. I suggested, I think, that we devise a series of tests, because we didn't have long in an audition. I hate auditions anyway, but one of the problems with John is he was quite, once he got something, he could do it and deliver it well, but he was a very slow learner. So when we wanted to try different arrangements, different grooves, different feels. It was a painful and really time-consuming process. So we thought, okay, we'll throw some different tests at these drummers and see how quickly people pick up these ideas. Phil arrived early, as he often does. He was the most punctual member of the band always, but he was there with his mate Ronnie, and listening to the two other drummers, I think, run through these tests. So by the time he sat down, he knew it. As an ex-drummer, or still a part-time drummer, I knew just from the way he sat down in the saddle that he knew exactly what he was doing, you know, just the way the body engages with the kit. It was clear that he could just lift the music. I think they'll always say a band is only as good as its drummer, and Phil is a great drummer.
The guitarist was more of a problem. In fact, we went out as a four-piece for about 2 or 3 months, I think, and which taught me a lot, because I ended up playing all the this piano I put through a fuzz box, that I played all the guitar parts that Ant had played, well, all ones I could anyhow, on that, at the same time playing the organ part. So I was doing this two-handed stuff, which I'd never sort of really done before, but it made me mature as a musician, great amount. And although it was probably never great, the four-piece thing, we did get it so it wasn't too bad. And we started writing this, we did this piece, which became the musical box, which we started as a four-piece. And it sounded, we knew this was really good. We used to play it on stage and stuff as a four-piece. It was good. We had a guitarist for very briefly, a guy called Mick Barnard, who came in for a month or two. And he was actually good, but he just probably wasn't assertive enough, And while that really wasn't working, we then, we auditioned Steve. Peter and I actually went to audition him because Mike was having trouble finding. He was always looking for someone to replace Ant, I think, which he was never going to be able to do because he was a good friend and everything. So we said, right, we'll find a guitarist. So we went and auditioned Steve, and we were really impressed with him. We really liked the way he approached things. It was just different. It wasn't entirely the same as us, but he played these things. His brother playing flute and him playing these things on guitar, which were quite slightly more classical style, perhaps, than we were used to. But we just thought he had a lot of imaginative ideas, and he didn't want to be a sort of mad guitarist. We weren't looking for. Most guitarists either wanted to be lead guitarists, sort of teeth, or else they were just purely acoustic guitarists, and weren't interested in either of those extremes. We wanted someone who could cover both ends. So Steve was a very important addition.
Away from me, cold-blooded woman, your thirst is not mine.
Well, what was great was that we were all a bit serious, and Phil was such as drummers should be, was the joker. He brought this lightness to the band. I know you got a shock when we first started rehearsing at the Maltings, because suddenly, we had these huge rows, and Tony would stomp out, or I'd stomp out for 10 minutes, and he was a bit like, what's going on, And I remember he stayed in my house, my mum and dad, for the first sort of 10 days rehearsing for our first writing period. This is before Steve, but musical box time. And then after sort of 2 weeks, he went to stay with Pete. So he could get to know him a bit, And I think he always thought that actually I didn't like him. I'd kicked him out and sent him off. It wasn't that way at all. It was just like sort of sharing him, being around so you get to know him. So it must have been a funny time, the initial bit as a four-piece for Phil, but he just loved drumming and it was sounding good.
And the drummer's role has always been, really, the guy who sits there is a bit overweight, farts, drinks too much, cracks the odd joke, and deflates the tension, That's really what our role is.
It could go from a blazing row to someone sitting down playing the most exquisite, gentle music, and I just think, wow.
It's just extraordinary that we have got on so great, because at the beginning we were from totally different backgrounds. I was a grammar school boy, but I actually had just come from 2 or 3 years at drama school where anything went. I went out with all the girls, whereas they come from public school where there were no girls, and I kind of was very light-hearted and jokey and fully comfortable on a stage, if you like, even though I was behind the drums. And they kind of seemed quite, uptight. And again, part of that was because Anthony had left as well, and they didn't really know what was going to happen. You know, I mean, he was a quarter of the writing, team. You know, so. So we'd be playing, and suddenly, I don't know, we'd stop playing, and something would happen, and then suddenly there'd be three of us, because we didn't have Steve at that point, and I'd say, wait, what's happened to Mike? He's gone. You know, or Tony. You know, what's happened to Tony? He'll be back in a little while. A couple of hours later, Tony would come back because something had been said by somebody, and I had noticed it, and very sort of lot of tension. So. Eventually, I mean, it took a long time for that to be gotten used to, and also a long time for it to sort of disappear slightly.
Well, Phil and Steve's contribution, particularly at this stage, I think, was to bring a big musicianship into the group. I think, Mike and I, I was still learning very much as a musician. I mean, I was, it was okay, but nothing brilliant. And Mike was certainly still finding his way, I think, as a musician. Whereas Phil he was a really high quality drummer right from the word go. He's got a great, brilliant sense of rhythm, and Steve obviously was technically a better player than we were at that time, I think. And that's what it really gave us, a bit of that sort of ability to sort of a bit of technique in there as well as everything else. Gave us a better chance to do things. I mean, for me, the contribution from Phil on the drums is what transforms it really, and you particularly coming back to them and remixing them. Just suddenly everything has a sort of lilt. It works in a way that it didn't. It was a bit stiff on Trespass, some of those things. And you listen on Nursery Cryme, and even there's those sort of complicated songs like the Giant Hogweed, they sort of have a much better flow about them, I think, for that reason. And Phil's other contribution, obviously, which we were aware right from the word go, was the fact that he could sing. The rest of us sort of made vague attempts at doing backing harmonies, which were okay. But with Phil, we actually had someone who had a really strong voice as well. So, and Phil and Pete used to do quite a lot of stuff singing in unison as well as stuff in the harmony work. And Phil was also very good at just picking out little harmonies, sort of a la sort of Crosby, Stills and Nash and things like that. Just little ideas would come to him like that. So they weren't contributing much as writers at this stage, either of them. But it was very much more musicians, which in a way we were quite happy with because we had quite enough material.
Phil definitely just lifted the foundation of everything, just with great grooves, and I think everything could be done better in some ways, but and I think Steve, it was colouring. He was a colouring agent in lots of ways, and it was this sort of dark, contained personality that was struggling to get out. I think that's partly why we connected with people, I think, was that there was this yearning, longing build-up of some compressed energy that needed to explode and get out. And we didn't always get it out, but people could feel and touch the sort of vibrations humming beneath the surface. And Steve definitely had a good dollop of unfulfilled frustrations, I think, that gave it a good personality.
I heard the old man tell his tale.
Writing Nursery Cryme, we got together in Tony Stratton Smith's house and put all these and just started writing really and pooling ideas and things, and it was easier writing say than it was in Trespass, but it still wasn't that easy, I suppose.